We drive around for miles looking for cheap gas, even if it only saves us a penny or two. Do you know that pilots do the same thing when they're fueling their aircraft? Watch us as we explore tips and tricks that pilots use to find cheap gas.
For starters, do you know how much a typical 747 airliner holds and burns in fuel? Look up the answer if you want and tell us your guess in the comments.
Before we dive into fuel prices, let's start looking at how we measure fuel consumption in airplanes and how is it different than cars. If you haven't already, make sure you watch this video that we did on airplane fuels.
You're probably familiar with the term for cars called MPG or miles per gallon. And according to statistics, on average, cars burn about 20 to 30 miles per gallon.
Of course, the heavier cars and trucks, they tend to consume more, and the lighter, more modern, more fuel efficient cars tend to consume less. But in aviation, this whole term miles per gallon or MPG doesn't work. Do you know why?
If you're driving at 60 miles per hour and you're burning 20 mpg, that is 3 gallons per hour. Airplanes tend to burn more than that and fly longer distances and at greater speeds.
Using the same scale, airplanes tend to consume 5, 10, 20, or even more gallons per hour. The turboprops and jets will consume significantly more.
So that's why the gallons per hour is more useful.
The bottom line is whether you're driving or flying, fuel prices are going up, and we're always constantly looking for cheaper way to fuel.
So if you look at the most common light aviation fuel, which is 100 low lead, 100 octane low lead, it's going to be anywhere from $3 to $4 per gallon to the $8 to $10 per gallon range. So for typical fuel burn, spending $50 to $100 an hour flying an airplane just on fuel alone is very typical.
Let's now get back to finding cheaper fuel. How do you do it as a car owner? Maybe you look for local gas stations with their advertised prices. Maybe you look for websites and apps like Gas Buddy, or perhaps you join membership programs like Costco, Sam's Club, or your favorite discount grocery store. We will explore the similarity with aviation.
So here are our top 4 tips and tricks pilots use to save money on gas. First is aviation apps. SkyVector, Garmin Pilot, ForeFlight. They all publish the fuel prices that are currently at your local airport. Secondly, local knowledge. Even though smaller airports are generally the ones with cheaper fuel, kind of knowing pilots at those airports and asking them what their current fuel prices is really useful.
Tip number 3 is joining gas credit cards and membership programs. This is very similar to what you do with Costco and Sam's Club. There are specific aviation fuel companies that can give you membership and discounted prices. Tip number 4 is you can choose to place or base your aircraft at a particular airport that gives you a discount for being a local customer. And this often comes into play when you have multiple airports that you can choose on where you want to base your aircraft at.
So do you think gassing up for flying and driving are really similar or really different? How do you save on fuel? Tell us in the comments.
If you like this kind of content, please do subscribe to our channel and like, comment, and also share this. I have personally never run out of gas flying the airplane, knock on wood, except I've come very close. There are times when I had to land somewhat unplanned way in order to fill because I do not want to be flying with low fuel. How about you?
Definitely. I've had low fuel before, never run out, but that has happened out in general aviation where people have run out of gas. And unlike driving in a car, for those of you who may have run out of gas on the road, it is a bit more dangerous when an airplane runs out of fuel. And we'll talk about some of the measures we use to protect against that.
Yeah, in the last episode, we talked specifically about this. Unlike a car where you can pull over to a gas station, in an airplane, your options are rather limited. So unless you're flying a glider with no fuel, you have to take into account how much fuel you have, how much the burn rate is, and what the en route weather is or any other obstruction that might prevent you from getting to your place with the fuel that you had planned for before.
So knowing how to do a little bit of math on fuel consumption, a little bit of fuel planning, and then staying aware of that throughout the flight is something that pilots are trained to do for every single flight. And on top of that, there are federal regulations that require that you plan to land with a certain amount of reserve. Now, in light airplanes, that can run anywhere from 30 to 45 minutes, depending on the weather. But most pilots typically like to say, I want to land with a minimum of 1 hour fuel or even 90 minutes if you're flying longer distances.
And this is very important because a typical small seat airplane maybe has a range of anywhere in the 2, 3, 4 hour. But let's say you have headwinds and the headwinds are going to slow you down. That means your fuel consumption could go up. And you need to factor all these things, not just in pre flight, but during in flight operations.
That's definitely the case. That's a big part of pilot training is always being aware of the fuel state, planning ahead. But if something isn't working with the fuel burn as you plan, to know where you're going to land and pick up fuel maybe a little sooner than possible. So the idea is to not push the fuel, don't go past those reserve. Unfortunately, it does happen occasionally due to many, many circumstances, but it's something that we're trained to prevent. And in terms of landing for fuel, we talked about public use airports having that available. You should be able to get what you need either in a full serve or a self-serve format. But I run into times where I need to stop for gas, land at an airport, and something is wrong. The credit card machine is broken. The fuel tank is out of fuel. Sometimes even the airport could be closed if there were an incident. And that's where that protective reserve comes in. You do not want to ever, ever get low on fuel.
So, therefore, planning for the unplanned becomes part of your anticipation.
And we talked about how pilots shop around, compare fuel prices, do their best to save money on fuel because it is very expensive in terms of fuel burn. But you're also trained, hopefully, to not let that thinking force you to press on in order to get to that next airport that you wanted to get the cheapest gas.
If you're driving on a highway, let's say in the Western US, you might see next gas is 100 miles away. And so think of that. What happens if you are planning for a certain amount of fuel and you run out and you have another 15 miles to go, 20 miles to go?
That's definitely foremost on flights where airports are further apart. You're going to land maybe a lot sooner than you need to pick up fuel for the next stop if that's going to be 100, 200, 300 miles away. And so that extra careful planning is great, especially when you're flying in more remote areas.
Some of these modern airplanes have engine monitors that tell you what the fuel burn is. Some of them don't. And therefore, you have to plan. And if you do that, you have to be on the conservative side. Assume that you're burning more than you think you're burning because chances are you are.
We hope you've never run out of fuel while driving, but have you had to pull over because you were really low on gas or couldn't make it to the station? What do you use to compare fuel prices? Tell us your ideas in the comments.